Well, the letter I sent to the mayor when they were cutting CAT was exactly that, Trevor. It is a huge opportunity to get an education without spending tens of thousands of dollars.
And the results of it, made by nonprofits and people, only draw more attention to the beautiful city of
Yeah,
Columbia, Missouri, where you can
ex-
enjoy such things.
and with a
So,
highly educated population in
yeah,
technology. And it went like that.
yeah.
But I do understand they have a training program, at least through the public schools, in floral arrangements.
Mm.
Sorry, there's irony there.
Thank you for joining us for the KOPN Oral History Project. I am Jackie Casteel, a volunteer programmer at KOPN with Rootin' Tootin' Radio, Sundays noon to 3. And I am with Christine Gardner. And I think that when I think of who Christine Gardner is, I think of a volunteer coordinator, a volunteer maestro. And hearing her voice on the radio call for volunteers on a boombox on a high shelf in the bakery of Flat Branch Brewing definitely was what encouraged me to come into KOPN and try to hone those voice acting skills. But it's always interesting to hear people say who they are. So, who are you? What do you do?
Um, well, I thought about this because I wanted to briefly be able to go through sort of a synopsis of how I came to be here, because it was a crazy route, shall we say. So quickly, I went through my life list of housing and where I
Nice.
was living.
That's what the best storytellers say to do. People, places, and things, go through
Exactly.
every
So we'll
house
go
you've
through
ever
this
lived
really
in.
quickly, but you'll see there's like this honing in thing that comes throughout that finally gets me here. So from birth to about 18, I lived on or near Air Force Base housing because my father was in the Air Force. Brief count of about 10 moves in that period of time. Then I spent 2 years here in Columbia in a dorm, and then I dropped out. And it spent about 6 months getting my way, and then wound up in Boston, where I lived for a year and a half, but managed to do 4 moves in Boston. Then I spent a couple years living out of a backpack and roughing it, and with a brief stint in Liberty, Missouri,
Ooh.
in a suburban house. But then a couple years living in backpack and a car. Came to back to Columbia and lived in a converted shed at the Pierpont Crossroads. There was a little house there, and there was a shed next to it, and that's where I lived in.
And
So
what year was that?
that was 1975. And I also lived on Aldea briefly, Cliff Drive, Coate Street, Clark, Missouri, Boonville, 2 moves, Glenwood, Boyd Lane and Glenwood. You see this? I'm homing in. And then in 1984, I moved to Anderson Avenue in the First Ward. And I have been there ever since.
I hear people don't leave Anderson.
Yeah, I have no intention of moving. And I hear from we were called dependents, back in the day, other grown up dependents or brats. You either continue moving all your life or you stop dead like I did. You don't move at all.
I imagine all those moves really contributed to the ability to wrangle volunteers, though. Meet
It would
new
it mean you
people.
had to be flexible. You had to hit the ground running. You had to make your network really quickly, because either they were moving or you were moving. And so I think I would have been a much more introverted person, but you just couldn't, or you didn't have any friends. It's because you had to get out there, meet your friends, and click. So so you had to read. I think you had to learn to read people. And I think I do carefully observe human psychology. I'm really fascinated by human psychology. And so that does work well with volunteer management, which is, I do think, like my true calling.
Yeah, it is. It's not a simple thing, and it is always important to remember that it's about the fun for the volunteer as well. And reading people is important to see,
Yeah,
like, are they having fun or are they pretending to have fun
yeah,
for my
yeah,
sake? Let's
yeah.
find a different project for them. And I was really impressed by that in the volunteer management at KOPN, of that you could sit at the desk and you could answer phones, or you could go run the board and not say a word on the microphone, or you could start subbing for people right away. You
Yeah,
know, lots of
yeah,
things depending upon, what you were interested in or the kind of person you are. A place for
exactly.
everyone.
Yeah, very open. Once again, KOPN, open to building your own thing. If you have the stamina and the perseverance to just go for it. I used to say you can do anything up at KOPN as long as it doesn't cost any money.
Yes.
But the amount of money you need is not as much because there is already this network, this foundation.
Oh, yeah.
So you're already on top of that.
As a
Then you
former
just have to find a few other resources to start a prison project or start any of the other things that people did or still do.
collaboration. It is a powerful tool and definitely something that's gotten me many jobs since my work at KOPN, and skills that I strengthened here.
Yeah, if you can work in this environment, that you've got a lot of skills that maybe don't fit on a resume as past like work experience, but they're there. They're useful.
Yeah.
They're skills you'll always have. You'll always have.
I feel like each one of those skills really corresponds to roles at KOPN, the many tasks that have to happen to keep a volunteer run nonprofit radio station on the air. What different roles did you play at KOPN over the years? What different hats have you worn beyond
Gosh.
volunteer coordinator? That's how I
That
met you.
kind of like evolved through decades. I started out just reading children's literature on air. I produced a show, 5 episodes for like 15 minutes or so in the evening, called Lullaby Broadway. So I would record one weekend. I used to come up on Sundays and record and then edit the next time I came up. And it was a grind, but
Like
I
edit
loved it.
on the reel to reel machine.
Yeah,
Oh man.
yeah. So it was all manual. I called it hand to ear coordination because you had to like rock the things. You had to listen. So it wasn't hand to eye; it was hand to ear, and so that was very time consuming. But it was I just always loved radio from the time I was a kid. I mean, radio was a big part of my parents' life. When we lived outside the U.S., we were living, there was always armed services radio. They would play the old radio. I remember doing my homework to The Shadow and things like that. Always loved that. And so that was kind of always a thread in my background also. And so then from that, I started teaching. We did some workshops for kids. Oh, and audio theater. Started doing audio theater with, someone would write a play. Corliss Smith would write a children's, redo a fairy tale, and we would do it, and totally
I'm familiar.
knew not what we were doing. We didn't have a clue what we were doing. We just did whatever, And then the radio workshops were quite popular, and those went on for quite a long time.
That was inside radio
Mm-hmm.
workshop?
Inside radio workshops. So summertime, there would be a series. So it went like kindergarten through 3rd grade, and then 4th through 6th, and then junior high, senior high, at various times through the summer for a 1 week or a 2 week workshop. And so we had so much fun. Oh my gosh. It was it was so fun. But I'd have like 8 kids in that little production studio. and we're trying to like do some sort of recording or something. I have to say that nothing was ever broken by a child,
Excellent.
except for a easel.
Oh, yeah.
There was no electronic equipment, which I can't say for all the adults. But and then let's see, I also did on air the Jewel Box for a while. Did a lot of sort of just like different projects, audio projects, a little series on poetry for spring, as part of maybe a sub-drive or something like that. And eventually got to where I was doing artists in the school workshop, residency programs through the Missouri Arts Council. And that was, and then I was doing pattern after MRTW, a sort of children's radio theater workshop where kids were writing the scripts and doing the acting along with sound effects, and adults hosting and things like that. But those were performed live, and that was very exciting. As a matter of fact, I brought you a couple. These are the programs for those.
Or I feel like the only inside radio that I've listened to has like bugs or roaches that are like in the air room, or like something is tiny or shrank or miniature and it's in the air room and it's trying to get the attention of the DJ or something. And it was a wonderful mechanism for it.
It is such an educational tool for children. And it was a little bit of a battle. I have to admit, there were people who did not think that children were an appropriate element up here. I'm like, well, I'm sorry, It's like, I think. And there was always a question of the quality. And one thing, our equipment was junk. The tape I was using was tape like it came in, like we applied to, play all these different Deutsche Welle things, and you'd find this tape and then you'd erase it and you use it. So some of it was good, some of it was bad. There were challenges, let's say. And as an educator, you're not really tied to the final project. Mm-hmm. It is the experience itself for the child. And so people would come up and they'd say, those kids sound terrible. You can't understand. And I'm like, I understand. And it's like all KOPN, it's not for you. Change the dial. Children do like to hear other children, and they can hear it because their ears are tuned to higher frequencies. We start losing those frequencies very quickly, and everybody's going, I can't quite understand what those kids are saying. Well, guess what? I've actually had somebody say, can you slow it down and lower their voices a little bit? And I'm like, no, it's not the point. Some of it came out very well, as you worked with the older kids or they had some experience. David Wilson came to one of.
Yeah.
And many of them went on to other, like artistic and editors in film. There was a lot of crossover there that I thought, because I always used a young person as an engineer also. So.
Yeah, I think Jason Watts was on this.
New
Jason, generation radio engineer.
I worked with Jason from the time he was about, I think, 14. He'd had a radio show from the time he was 12.
Well, and that's that, talking about the experience and just getting together for a week with Steve D'Onofrio and Sam listed as these other engineers.
Oh, yeah.
And feeling like you have Sam Griffin's got your back as a 14-year-old. But just thinking about those names and those people and what small time I've had to interact with them and what I've learned, and thinking about what that must have been like for a child at that point in time.
Yeah.
And now we have so much technology that makes these things easier to do and more accessible than standing at the giant NASA computer of
Right.
a reel-to-reel machine and editing. Do you ever get the inkling to do children's audio theater workshops in the present day?
No. Unfortunately, I had to go out and get a real job at a certain point. One of my kids was going to college, and so that was just at the point where things became digitized. So I can still probably do analog at some, on some level. I can't do anything digital. I can tell you what needs to be cut and what, should be a fade instead of, but I can't do it myself. So I've become a bit of a Luddite also.
And maybe with some collaboration.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I have written a few scripts that, other producers have, like for drives and things like that.
Right.
That's always fun.
So, I'm going to move into the next question. Tell me about a time that you or the station was faced with something you didn't think you would be able to do.
Couldn't do.
Or you didn't think you would be able
Didn't
to
think
do.
we'd be able to
Maybe you
do.
ultimately accomplished it,
Mm-hmm.
but was there,
Almost everything's that way at KOPN. It's like, are we going to be able to pull this off?
every fun drive?
Well, it's so much of events and things like that are, there's that moment where you're just not sure you're going to be able to pull it off.
Was it right before you flipped the switch to go on?
Yeah, particularly with a live event or something like that. I've always been a bit fearless about making mistakes. I mean, some of them hang with you. You never forget that time you did something and it meant. But most of the time, you have to be very forgiving. That at a certain point, I always say, if you're doing something and it's like in the frenzy of the moment, sort of like the fog of war, you just have to soldier on, get through it, and you come out the other side. And so, almost everything up here is like that because everything's so many component pieces coming together. And is there the wherewithal? Sometimes volunteers don't show up, and things happen.
It's a volunteer gig,
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Do you remember the first time you came up to the station?
Very well. I was working in the professional building up there, like right off of campus, for Diskwasher, which is an old name you might not even remember, but there was a product called Diskwasher that cleaned your vinyl records.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like a phenom, It was like in magazines. It was a big thing. I was working at Diskwasher down in a basement, filling little bottles with fluid. And we listened to the KOPN a lot. And so I got it in mind that we should, throw our change into a jar and then, when we had some money, take it up to KOPN. It was only fair. So we did that. And I remember coming up with this little jar of coins that we had thrown into the jar. And, I didn't get any further than the front office. And it was just like, whoa, this is pretty funky. And because you always have, with audio, you always have that idea that what you're listening to is clean and orderly and everyone is like got good hair and, it's like that's the way you imagine it.
It's like watching news on TV. Like I feel like I imagined like the sleek, clear desk of like a journalist on television.
Right. But the reality is not the same. So I saw the reality, and that was just very fun. And it wasn't until several years later, Pat Watkins was on air, and she said something about we have no children's programming on KOPN. There had been some early on at the beginning. And so she was interested, and I've always loved children's literature, and I always thought it would be fun. I like to read aloud. And I thought it would be fun. I thought I could come up and then, somebody would, like record me and edit it and it would go on. Yeah.
Well, I was volunteering for a fund drive, and I got invited to pledge pitch on women's issues, women's voices, and I was there with Sarah Catlin and with Carol Greenspan and Molly Zapp, I think. And so there was maybe like 10 years between, or like it was just this great spread of women of different ages. And they were like, yeah, you did a great job. Look, you should be part of the show. You want to be part of the show? Here, first day you can have March 7th or whatever. And I was like, yeah, okay. Can we talk about this? And they're like, yeah, sure. Sounds good. I show up and I was just thinking these other ladies were going to be there, just like a fun drive, and was like, oh, I'm doing this by myself. I'm doing this by myself. Oh my gosh, I'm doing this by myself. And like,
they didn't even say that you were good.
I think Michelle Grant or someone came and helped me, but it was definitely a unexpected. You just think that there's this whole team, and then you learn what DIY really means, what it means to be
and on-the-job training, because there is no practice studio.
No.
It is just the studio. So all your mistakes are going to go out over the air, and I don't think our listeners really understand.
I don't know. I think that we just had this wonderful opportunity for shows that you're so used to getting all the mistakes and stuff. And everyone through the quarantine period seemed to shift to these pre-produced music shows and stuff. And they can be great. But there's a certain level that I would be disappointed to not get the banter in between, or like when someone's kind of filling time because they're switching the CDs. Like, I want to feel like I'm right there with them.
Yeah.
And it's company.
That's the wonderful thing about radio. It really is a very close interaction between the listener and the person on air. It's like you two, even though you're not linked by any more than these electromagnetic, waves, there is something there in the human voice, always. Mm-hmm. And it's the best instrument we've ever, it surpasses any musical instrument that's ever been invented in the quality and the texture and the, dynamics and the emotion that can come out of our voices. And I personally prefer hearing things as opposed to seeing them on a screen.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're not looking at this person with some sort of judging of how they look on that day. You're hearing the voice. It's almost like you're hearing the heart and soul.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot harder to, lie and get away with it when you're just hearing the voice. Something comes across.
I feel like one of my earliest trainings at Columbia Access Television, now VidWest, thank you for facilitating
thank you, VidWest.
The oral history project, and that you have to have good sound to have a good film or TV, and just like, it's not going to be a believer. You're not going to get sucked into the story and have your disbelief unless you hear that soul and heart in somebody's voice. It's amazing.
And it's easier to do it when you don't have to worry about, I've known a lot of people who were very quiet and introverted, and then they get in front of the microphone and be in a room by themselves, and they'd be like, just talking your head off, No,
my sister asked me to do a public speaking meeting with her, Mule Skinners or something, and what is it called?
Toastmasters?
Toastmasters.
Aha.
That's what it was. Oh, I got confused with the other one. Toastmasters. My sister wanted me to do Toastmasters, and she's like, "You're on the radio. Will you come do it with me?" And I want to do public speaking. I was like, "Zoe, that is not that's not radio. Radio, I'm talking to one person. I can't talk to a whole room of people. And felt that way at events at the Blue Note. Like, I may have had many people listening to me on the radio, but like standing up on a stage in front
It's a
of
completely
those people,
different thing.
Completely different.
Yeah,
Completely different.
yeah. Well, I used to tell the kids, you know, if they were feeling a little, you know, uncomfortable in front of the microphone, all you have to do is think about the one person that you want to be talking to, and I suggested their grandmother, because your grandmother's going to love everything you say.
And then for FCC guidelines, you know.
Oh yes, and
If you're talking to your
are there any
grandmother-
words your grandmother would be disappointed to hear? Because there were always the kids who wanted to push the envelope.
Tell me about a time you didn't think something was going to work, but it did. Like an unexpected success at KOPN. Or show, even. If there was ever a show, nobody's going to listen to this show, and was a success.
We have had a lot of that because I think our audience is pretty eclectic. One comes to mind is when I was working on the 30th anniversary, and we had an offer from the public library. They had a storyteller coming in, and I wanted to have events every month up here. And was casting, had some months I didn't have anything. And so suddenly, library calls and said they have this person that they are sponsoring to come in, but she's got a story that's really not a family children's story. It's Tristan and Isolde. And she would love to do it for us. And I was like, great, this will be perfect for, one of our events, because it's featuring spoken arts and storytelling. But I wasn't sure, was it going to be, a thing, or would anybody show up? Because we were going to do it live. She wanted an audience. Well, we filled this room. Someone brought in a tape recorder so that they could take it back home, because, even though it was live on air, just, I guess, wanted to share it later. And the storyteller was delighted, and it even ran over and was running into someone's jazz program. And so we said, we're going to gun right up, but we'll stop, because and they said, oh no, go ahead, finish the story. And it was the most delightful event that I was really impressed with how many people seem to really enjoy it. And once again, I think, radio, storytelling, it's a natural.
Mm-hmm. Natural success.
Yeah.
How has the station changed since you were involved?
I think it's more serious. Not so much funky, crazy fun. Whimsy. Yeah. Just silliness, general kookiness. Things seem so serious now. I would like us to get back to the wacky.
I've already secured a place for a few action figures in the new building.
Oh, good.
Yes, I claimed some rafters. Passed it by Dylan.
But on air also, I think there's a lot of serious stuff on KOPN now, and granted, things are pretty grim and serious, but really that's when we in particular need the humor. And that's one thing that I really do miss. I used to just listen, because you just never knew what kind of crazy thing was going to be, somebody coming up with an idea of some sort of, what was it called? It was the Cosmic you could join the Cosmic KOPN Commando and get a badge and a pen. I was like, okay.
I liked the show that was in a submarine, and
every
week
they
were trapped in the submarine and trying to.
And you'd hear the bubble.
The little ping in the background with it.
Well, and then there was the hound dog, the Tennessee hound dog, who lived under the front porch.
So nice.
And somehow managed to beam his programming to KOPN in the mornings on Saturday. A lot of people had personas. I myself, and this is probably the appropriate time, I myself as Ruby for the Jewel Box show, I had a lot of fun doing. And I hope I don't mess my microphone up, but I just, like Ruby wears a little bling. And this was always fun. The Jewel Box I inherited from Ann Korn, now mayor. And she did the show for a very long time with all her children, and they all had Jewel names, and it was the Jewel Box. And so this was preordained that we have a Jewel name. So I became Ruby. My co-host was Opal.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. And we actually didn't dress up. You didn't need to. All you had to do is talk about it. So we would get on, and the first thing in the morning we would say, oh, Opal, I just love that hat you have on. And it coordinates so well with your shoes. It's amazing. And people would come up to be on the show, and they go, you're not wearing satin. You just said you're wearing satin. But occasionally, it's fun to dress up. And I actually used to do it a lot in schools. And so, we would have a bit of jewelry on or something. And we always had for the gentlemen, we had a tie appropriate when they came up to be on the show. This is the rat tie.
Nice.
You'll notice. Features rats. I'm sure there's a story behind that. And some people would wear the rat tie and some turned it down. Go figure. I don't know. They had an opportunity and they let it pass. We used to also hand out royal family trading cards.
Oh, no.
Here's a really good one. Here, you can have this.
Reserve
Yes,
of
yes.
love and loyalty.
I have a complete set. I mean, I'm just bragging. Complete set of royal family trading cards. So that's what I'm saying. Things aren't really wacky anymore.
Need a little bit of wacky. We've got, those holdouts on. Need a little bit of wacky. We've got, those holdouts on the wee hours of the weekends.
It's still there, but we just need to encourage it a little bit more.
I do feel like we're doing this oral history collection project, but I don't normally talk this much about KOPN unless it's a fund drive. I feel like there's all these reasons to be like, and now become a member. And you could bring the whimsy to KOPN community radio. 2 to 5 minutes, 2 to 6 minutes, 18 minutes, whatever you want to do. Full improv hour.
Satire.
Submit it to the programming committee, KOPN.org.
Are you on the committee?
I am on the committee.
Oh, good.
I have not made it to a meeting in a couple months, but I was kind of consumed by True False.
We know life gets in the way sometimes of radio.
So just like to connect it into, changing culture of the station or how the station's changed. How do you see the station's impact on the community and the arts community as a whole in, just thinking about that true false and David Wilson being at an Inside Radio workshop and Paul Sturtz spending time here. And then now we have the 20th anniversary of True False Film Festival next year.
Yeah.
And, what other ways can you think of that
think of all
had a
the
mark on Columbia?
Like the contra dancing and the number of musicians we have that have connected through KOPN.
Walked past each other or been at the same house concert.
Been in 5 bands, different bands together, off and on. And I have, I am doing a project where I'm researching KOPN's program guides in the State Historical Society collection. And it's amazing how the musical community really supported us from the very beginning and did all kinds of free concerts and events. They showed up. So sometimes we have not been as grateful, I think, and could probably rectify that in the future by offering more live events and more opportunities for local musicians.
I'm excited for that to come back and be
We used to have like weekly live concerts up here. Steve D'Onofrio did them for years.
I kind of feel like we need,
or maybe it was monthly. I can't remember, but we frequently had live music going on.
Yeah, hearing a band play live or one person play live in this library is an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And I know that even as many times as I've asked professional bands that get paid hundreds of dollars, like they still come back and do it for free and still come back and make the time to do it because it does mean something. So
yeah,
they're getting something back out of it. I think they
well,
they
musicians
appreciate
love
the
to
station.
play, and they and we, are a welcoming place. This is obviously, it's soaked in. This is the Ashlock room. This is where fiddles were repaired back in the 20s and 30s. There's always been music in this. It's soaked into the walls. It makes the walls stand up.
and I think that community radio is a lot of physical technological resource. Like I have the means to play a recording of a musician and reach your ears, but that the live performance is also bringing that artist audience experience that you're not getting from a recording.
Yes.
And I feel like I've been to so many shows at Rose Music Hall, at venues around town recently where that's what everyone's saying, like, wow, this is so much more amazing than this recording that they made in a box studio with some different musicians that they don't always play with, where it's like, this makes sense, guys. They're playing for you right now. That's why it is so great. They are playing for you and playing for everyone that's listening. And KOPN does it every day, 24 hours.
That's right.
Playing for you.
We have great music programming on KOPN.
What is your favorite event the station has hosted?
Well, I love the Luna Fairs. Do you remember the Luna Fairs?
I don't remember them, but I've seen the historic like guides or underwriting messages for them.
Yeah. We were at a particular low point, one of many, and there was just a group of women that just came together to do that, and it was, a big show of love and support that came out for that, and it was one of those things that is like, oh yeah, we still reach people, they still remember. When it happened was early aughts, I think. We had a long history of feminism at KOPN. There was, from the very beginning, there was a month. There was the Women's Month. There was the Women's Whole Weekend. There was the Women's, page in the program guide. And gradually that kind of disappeared as we entered periods of rocky times. We always had some women's programming, but a lot of the other sort of, like events and gatherings and the Crystal Set Feminist Collective kind of fell by the wayside. So when we were at a really low point, we were trying to kind of resurrect that and called it a Luna Fair. It was a all-day event that was held at the Unity Church. We did about 2 or 3 of them, and it was a whole day of women's programming and workshops and exhibits of different art and things. It was just a very women-centered But we had, Sam Griffin doing the tech, I believe. And
A supportive ally.
how many groups has he served? Oh my gosh, what a guy. So it was just we just needed that at the time, and it was very nice that the women came through. It's like, yeah, we'll come in, we'll bring the casseroles, we'll do this. Make it happen.
I played a song this past Sunday. Women of the world take over, or else it's not going to be good. But it was very reminiscent of when it all gets really really dark. Yeah.
Yeah.
Call your mama.
Yeah. Well, Pete
Find
Seeger,
your
I've heard him
mom.
say several times, if the world's going to survive, it's because of women and children.
Yeah. Who are some of the people you met through your work at KOPN? How much time do we have? Who are some of the people that you've met through your work?
Gosh. Well, Amy Goodman comes to mind. I mean, that's just like several times I've been in the same general vicinity of Amy Goodman. That's always very exciting. Frank Stasio, he's an NPR host. Lots of people through MRTW, like Bergman and Osman, the Fireside guys. This is all sort of like the radio theater. I have to say, the person that changed my life was Brother Blue. He came to the first radio conference, children's radio conference that I held. And I met him up here. He was a patron storyteller of Cambridge, Massachusetts. They had their public radio station had a show called The Spider's Web for young people, not young kids, but he did some storytelling on that show, which I was aware of, and was invited to come here. I think it was for like a homecoming parade. And I didn't go to the homecoming parade. I just didn't, but like I said, I came up here on Sundays to do my production work. So I come up here one Sunday, and in the big room, there's this man, like standing. He's dressed all in blue. He's covered in butterflies and stars
Fish
and
and
just
bells.
pins and ribbons and it's like the room was lit up. Now there is no outside light in that room, but that man exuded the sun, the warmth. It was like being in this warm aura of this man, and he was just like so excited. He was like, oh, I can't believe this place is so great. This is like being in the kitchen. Sometimes you go in a house and they put you in the parlor. No, not here. This is a kitchen. You go in the kitchen. He said, what are you here for? And I said, well, I come up and do my production work. And I said, what are you up here to do? And he said, well, I tell stories. I'm Brother Blue, and I'm up here to tell stories because everywhere I go, I try to tell stories to prisoners, try to go to prisons. And so I'm up here because the prison program, Zebra Sunrise, is on. And he just bowled me over. I mean, it was like, whoa, this guy is amazing. And so I forego doing my production stuff and watched him tell stories on the Zebra Sunrise program through the glass. And interestingly enough, there had been a mainland Chinese student showing up the same morning. It was like University of Missouri was one of the first, once China was opened, was one of the first universities to get Chinese students from mainland China coming here. And this was maybe a J student or something, and he wandered up that Sunday morning to see what this KOPN thing was all about. So I talked to him for a little bit too. And he went into the air room with Brother Blue and the Zebra Sunrise folks. And I'm telling you, once Brother Blue started telling stories, I mean, it was all over. I mean, I'm crying, I'm laughing, I'm like, oh, it was a transformative experience. So, a few years later, I did the radio conference, and I asked if he would come and be like the host and tell stories in between the scripts.
Nice.
And had more exposure to Brother Blue, who was barely tethered to the planet. It was like, he's, I think, the only real holy man that I've ever met. He was definitely a holy man. And he had a dual degree in philosophy and theology, I think, from Harvard. And his wife kept him tethered to the ground. She always traveled with him. Otherwise, I don't think he would eat. I don't think he would like think of anything but telling stories.
Well, I'm excited to try to find some recordings of Brother
We
Blue
have
out
them. And Steve, of course, did all the sound for, he taped everything he could of Brother Blue. Steve and I had an experience with Brother Blue together. It was like, this guy is like so amazing.
Steve D'Onofrio is pretty amazing too.
Yeah, and but you think he's a tough nut, but
Oh my gosh, yes.
it's like
That's back to Radio Magic. Where he was definitely someone who wore like black jeans and was tall and maybe losing some of his hair and with a beard and like just like this really lumberjack brawny paper towel man in my head. And then when I first saw him at MRTW, I think was like one of the first time, or not MRTW, but NATF, getting that opportunity to do that audio theater workshop in West Plains, and seeing this guy carrying Tibetan singing bowls, and just a little short guy and his glasses and everything, and being like, "Oh, can you give me a ride down to the Yellow House?" and getting to know him for his Tibetan singing bowl. Experiences with Dwight Frizzell. And,
oh yeah, there's a lot going
those
on with Steve.
So yeah, Brother Blue. It sounds similar to so many other moments that have been shared by KOPN programmers and the guests that come through the hallways.
Yeah, they were. You never knew who you were gonna. One time I came up here to work, and the whole big room was full of Japanese monks walking across the country.
Oh man!
And they're all chanting. So it's like, oh, I guess I won't be doing my production, but that was the One Truth Many Paths show before the prison show. So you just never, like you come up here and you just don't know who you're going to meet. I mean, it used to be everybody who came to do almost any kind of public speaking or something would get drug up here. Musicians playing around town. Oh, you got to see KOPN. And that's what happened with Brother Blue. He didn't even know we existed until somebody said, oh, you got to see KOPN. And they have prison show too. And that got him up here.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. I'll never forget doing the Jewel Box show with my co-host Opal. And I shared one of the royal family playing cards with her. It was a gift, so she's opening it up. Lots of crackling of tissue paper. Good sound effect. And then it's Princess Anne, and she goes, "Oh, and who is this? And what is that on her head?" And she had this hairdo that was like helmet head, and I started laughing. I couldn't stop laughing. But you kind of had to see the card. Anyway, I just lost it. I just couldn't, we had to go to music.
Poor Anne.
I know. Now I understand a little bit more. But those cards are vicious. I mean, they're vicious to everyone.
I don't know. I think that back to referencing events and live house concerts and First Friday house concert experiences, like it's really cool to see big name musicians and get to meet Ani DeFranco or
Yeah.
David Bromberg, and then totally mess up the recording because, of course, when it's somebody that you really want to record, you forgot to hit record.
Right. Those are the ones that kind of hang with you. Well, I got to
Yes.
meet Rafi.
Oh, banana phone.
The wheels on the bus go
That's pretty
round
big
and
deal.
round.
That's pretty big deal to me. That is huge. It explains why there's so many records in this collection. But
I forgot all about that. He probably was the most famous person I ever met.
similarly, though, with your Lunafair comment, I'd still say like my most tingly, precious on air moments would be opening up the microphone for 15 minutes to a woman who's never shared her poetry with anybody else and like see Violet Vonderhaar or some professional female musician going up after her and seeing that musician crying in the green room or the library because of the words that
Yeah.
that 16-year-old was sharing, or that just recovered from cancer woman shared, and it was always that like group event
Yeah.
of sharing in between it that
We
was
used
like,
to have
oh,
whole days of,
good
open
times.
houses where people could mingle and meet each other and laugh and cry.
Yeah, when people get together, it's just amazing. Whether
Isn't
it's
that a Raffi song
waving.
too? The more we get together, the happier we'll be.
Is that Raffi?
Oh, I'm sure.
Oh man. Yeah,
He
I just
sang them
kind of
all.
thought that just like sprung out of kindergarten teachers everywhere
Well,
at one
that's how he
point. They
got
just
his
woke
start.
up
His
with
wife
it.
was a kindergarten teacher, a preschool teacher. Next thing you
Effective.
know, he's in front of thousands of crying babies trying to have a concert. I heard about a bit about the problems of being a child, performing before child audiences. It's
Uh,
tough.
the
Oh, met Sharon Lewis and Lois and Bram also with Margie
with that.
Sable to me in the
We
middle of
do
the night.
need some children's programming on
We
KOPN. I'm just
do,
getting
we do.
excited now.
And think of all the kids that came through that, like stayed with us. I mean, Jake used to be Adelstein was the music librarian for the station
Oh,
when he was 16.
nice.
That used to be a position, it was
Music
like
director.
music director, who was curating the collection, making sure everything was in the right genres and stuff.
Yeah. Sometimes it's nice to have someone that's got like accountability or
Yeah,
ownership on
yeah,
a task and see it happen. That's where I want to get more free music again. Where they send us stuff,
yeah,
but we have to be doing the reporting for them to have the incentive
right.
to send
And the
us the
shows
stuff.
to like stay in contact with them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Um, okay, so you've talked about some challenging times at KOPN. What is the biggest challenge that you've been involved in with KOPN, and how did it turn out?
Ooh, that was when we didn't have any staff and I was president of the board. That was really scary. That was very scary. I had been away for a while. Things had gotten really bad. There was, I actually grieved for KOPN. I really thought, it was the AAA format. I just didn't know that it was going to make it. And I had a job, so I had, I had to do all that, and then didn't have time for radio. And but then there'd be meetings, things would still be looking like they were crashing and burning. But few people came to me and they said they wanted to form a coup and take over the station from the current chaos. I said, well, I don't do coups, but I'll run for the board. Well, I got on the board, and Chris Kelly at the time was president of the board, and within like 2 months or so, very, very briefly, very quickly, I was just on the board. Chris announces he's become a judge. He can't be part of any sort of local or state thing. And so he's resigning from the board, and he suggests that I should be president. And I'm like, oh, no, I'll be intern for a while. Well, nobody else ever liked it. And that's when things really started hitting the fan. And we didn't have money for any staff at all.
What else was going on in your life at that time?
Oh, I was getting a divorce, I think, or something. There was a lot going on. It was pretty bad. Yeah. And so I really did think that we were going to have to like turn the lights off and close the door. But I don't know. At the 30th anniversary, I think maybe helped because it was something positive. So I was working on that.
Accomplish it with no staff.
Well, just started doing, like patching something together, collaborating, finding people who would do different parts with me. And one of the other board members did 3 concerts, so that was 3 months of concerts that just happened. And just kind of kept struggling on. And, I applied for the station manager job and didn't get it, so there wasn't that after a while. I continued with the 30th anniversary, and we had really a wonderful series of events. There was a huge turnout for the, David and Paul picked out a movie for us to show at the Missouri Theater with, in conjunction with them. It was American Graffiti.
I've seen the pictures.
Yeah, and that was fun. We had the classic cars come out, people dressed up. We had the Tristan and Isolde thing. We had several. We had this wonderful exhibit in Davis Gallery on Stevens campus of our memorabilia. That was a big, plus. Everybody was excited about that. And things started improving, so
getting out there, interacting with the community, events.
Yeah.
Pulled through.
Yeah. But it was skin of our teeth, I think. Really, really close there. We were in debt, heavily in debt. That's very dangerous for not-for-profit like us. No one was really minding the store, I guess. I don't know. It's like, who was approving loans? Loans, and we didn't. There wasn't for equipment. It was, I have a bad feeling it was for salaries. We lost bingo, and when we lost bingo, that cash cow dried up, and we had staff that were depending on salaries, and I don't know. I wasn't there at the time.
Well, and when you don't have staff, it's easy for things to slip through.
Right. And the staff are like scrambling. They're finding other ways, like they're moving on. And so then when there wasn't anybody, it was just vestiges. Oh man, we didn't have a checkbook register. I don't know how they were functioning. It's like
it is a very impressive effort to run a nonprofit. A nonprofit organization that models a business like a radio station or a movie theater.
Well, and being
it's done with
operating 24/7, 365 days a year, the number of volunteers that are needed, and the level of their responsibility and importance.
Integrity.
And yes, they need there has to be a lot of structure for it to really function well, and we just, we struggle with being able to pay enough of a living wage to make this monumental job. Any one of the staff have a job that's way beyond what they can do.
Yeah.
And so, now we're in the process of building up our volunteers and, what do they call it when you have a team that's got a lot of, backup players?
Mm-hmm. Deep bench.
A deep bench. That's what we're trying to get now, I think, a deep bench.
So you've got that guy that is great at putting on live concerts, and you have that person that's doing children programming, and
Right.
the person who's
And
doing
they all have
bookkeeping
and
and
they all
grant
have
administration.
collaborators also,
Yeah,
because that's really the way.
things
It's the
happen.
best. Yeah, it's the best.
Teamwork. Speaking of teams, team shirts. What's your favorite
Oh,
KOPN t-shirt?
actually, it's not a T-shirt. It's a bowling shirt.
Oh my gosh, there are KOPN
Rare,
bowling shirts.
rare. There was a KOPN bowling shirt.
So if I come across it at like Goodwill, I know
Oh,
that
this,
there's.
I don't think any of them are out in the market. They're just, I used to work at Leo's Old Clothes, and Jack had bought out like a huge factory warehouse of bowling shirts. St. Louis is like the bowling capital of the world or something. Anyway, he had like a bazillion bowling shirts. And so he was silk screening on them. And that gave me the idea that for one of our drives, we could do bowling shirts instead of T-shirts. And so Dave Mars did this wonderful, like silk screen thing on the back about bowling for KOP or something. It's like, I still have mine someplace, I think. But yeah, that was a
I think I've
goodie.
just seen like the art print maybe and not it on an actual shirt.
Yeah.
Because the
The bowling
the
shirts were
bowling
really,
theme
they were really
sounds
seedy
familiar.
looking. They were not, like, they weren't, like the deluxe bowling shirts. They were the ones that were in the factory, like, that hadn't sold.
Oh man, I kind of we may have covered this a little, but what skills did you learn or develop through your work at KOPN that you used after in other areas of your life?
Oh, lots. Public speaking, teaching. Got a lot of practice being a teacher up here that I was able, that goes on with you, like for everything. Of course, volunteer management and coordination. A feeling of confidence
Ooh yeah.
that I never felt like really like a techie, but I felt like I was approaching that, working with MRTW and things like that. It wasn't my true calling, but I did get so I could, edit a meme tape and, just do some stuff. And had some good critiques of some of my audio productions. You used to be able to take them and ask somebody to listen to them at MRTW and what do you think of this? And
I just get excited when someone says nice transition.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I think this could go commercial. Whoa! Well, it can't because I recorded something that was already in print. Because it was a good story and I wanted to make it into an audio production. And they'll never know.
Fair enough. Yeah, I feel like that when you have the necessary skills, even if it's not the professional ones, but when you can get the word out about something, it is incredibly empowering.
Mm-hmm.
Back to, spending time with you, volunteering over at the recycling place, and I don't remember if I was slated to wear the blue bag costume at the parade or if it was something that was just brought up at that moment. And being, in my early 20s and being like, wow, can I wear this costume and walk through the parade? And whoever had done it before, who it was getting out of it, was like, "Oh, it's fine. Just try not to let the crying kids bother you, or something. If kids are scared of you, like don't let it bother you." And doing it, and just remembering your voice and thinking like that lady was good to work with. Like she seemed like she had it together. She's at this radio station now. I'm gonna go.
That's
check
right.
it
You
out.
transitioned over to KOPN from recycling.
But at that time in my life, I let a lot of people walk over me. And it wasn't like KOPN really, really made me feel like I could do something and not be too scared to do it. Because, like you're saying, you learned by doing, or if someone had told me I was going to do that first radio show all by myself, would I have just sat on my couch and not, and thought too much about it and got anxious? But I made it through and got good feedback on it. And so it encouraged me to do it again because Carol or Sarah or Molly or someone said like, oh, great. Glad that you brought up this thing. And I was like, yeah, you're
I
right.
was listening and I heard you.
Something that I'm doing this. Yeah. You felt heard. You got that feedback.
Yeah.
And even when it's even when it's just to say that they were really digging a song, gosh, that feedback means something. I really, KOPN community radio.
I feel really fortunate. I mean, how many people have the opportunity to do this? I mean, it's a very small percentage of people in the billions of people on the planet. And to land here, and go through that whole journey and land here with KOPN, I don't know, I just feel like, boy, that was pretty lucky.
Oh, yeah.
I could have gone any number of other places, and who knows, I certainly wouldn't have had the experiences, of this. It's so unique. I go to my high school reunions. Nobody has a history like mine. Of course, they're all military brats too. So I mean, they do things. Like they're out traveling, they're doing stuff. But nobody is like a radical feminist child educator at KOPN, at a radio station doing, independent radio stuff.
Oh yeah, I think looking back, I would never have imagined that I could say I've produced a 7-hour live women's house concert that switches artists every 20 minutes and sets up a whole nother band, and where it's led me. And I'm really thankful that KOPN has.
There should be more of it. There should be. I mean.
Oh, there's going to be more. There's going to be so much more.
It's so frustrating because you see the potential of self-learning, self-entertainment. We can entertain and inform each other. We do not need professionals to do this. We can become our own experts. We can become just as good and not have to spend, 4 years at a university and a lot of money.
Yeah, National Audio Theater Festival, MRTW, of working alongside Firesign Theater. We're like just underneath, I think, where the records are. And great sound effects artists or NPR recording professionals, and just learning that one of them had written the script too, or one of them also works as a typesetter back at their college town. And it made... It removed the veil of celebrityism that was on art for me growing up as a child raised on television and popular media and cable.
It all has to be perfect and done by professionals. And
but no, you can just live a rich creative life alongside whatever job you have.
I always loved those Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney movies. I don't know, those old black and white ones when they were young and there would be some sort of problem, and they would, like the campus, something burned down, or they needed to do something and raise some money, and let's put on a show. And they would the whole movie was them putting on a show, and I always loved that. I thought, this is KOPN. We're just like, let's. I mean, we came out of a failed alternative newspaper. That was the germ of people. They had a alternative newspaper that failed, and instead of saying, oh, well, I guess that didn't work, they said, well, let's start a radio station, do a show. And it's so, it's like just crazy, to think of that sort of chutzpah and confidence, but they didn't fold up. They just said, well,
success.
Yeah,
Success,
we're just do this. It was the start of 50 years of
a very useful tool.
Yeah.
And I hope that we use this tool for the next 50, 100.
I think it's a miracle that we're here and that we have a building, a new home. It's a miracle to me. It's like, wow, in my wildest dream, I didn't think we could pull it off.
Quit paying rent.
Quit paying rent. Quit having the stairs. I love this place, of course. I've done hundreds of tours of the station. You know, it's like really means a lot to me, this building. But it will be good to have our own place.
I've done a lot of things that had small attendance.
Yeah.
So the
and
parking
hauled
lot
stuff
and
up
the
and
lack
down
of
those
stairs.
stairs.
Great.
I used to bring Brendan up when he was little and up the back stairs. And he was in his 30s, and he finally said, you know, Mom, I used to be really scared going up those stairs because you look down and it just looks like you can fall through those little holes.
I do wish we could still have one more, 7-hour concert in here before we leave this room. Just one more.
Yeah. Do we have the time?
Let's just put on a show.
Let's put on a show. Get started, Jackie.
We're ready for it. I know, and then I get to that point.
Yeah. There's so many ideas. You can't do them all. I mean, we're all bubbling over with so much creativity that you can't, you have to.
I think I'll work on some humorous children's programming first.
Humorous children's programming,
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Oh, I think you'll have a lot of fun with that.
Yes. Wow. My favorite KOPN t-shirt would probably be the beard contest one from, I think, the very first year, that just has flowers and vines all in this really beautiful curls of beards because I just really liked the idea of a glam beard.
A glam
event
beard.
where men had to answer beauty pageant questions just like women had to answer them at Miss America. You would not have guessed, but I used to be a huge Miss America fan of the pageant, of just liked that competition. But
I haven't been to do they get asked those questions?
What would you do to promote world peace worldwide if you would become Miss Universe?
See, this is the humor I'm talking about. I have thought for a long time that the beard contest is one of the main fun events that we have these days. How about if you tell me about a time you didn't think something was going to work, but it did?
I think that when reading that question, I have a you're about to go on air anxiety feeling back to those live events where you're running the sound and it's no, David, it's still there. It's still there. The buzz is still there. I don't think so. But on one particular live event, We Always Jazz series, John was in the air room with Kevin Walsh. But then Kevin was also having us set up a live feed of the Believers, I believe, some hip band that I think I also worked with someone in a kitchen too that was in that band. So there was a little bit of that nervous, oh, these guys are so cool. And it was the first time that I had done something that was live remote, and Kevin was it'll be easy, and we'll run the cord across the alley to the Blue Note and out the back door, and it'll be fine. And I remember just 3 different times running out the back door over to the Blue Note and then running back over to Kevin and not quite understanding how do you talk to the person who is on air right now talking to someone else before their next thing happens. And I just remember starting to cry, and Kevin seeing me behind, and he puts on a song, and he comes out, and he's like, "You can do this, Jackie. You're better than this. You can make it happen." And I was like, "What do you mean I'm better than this? Am I failing you?" And run back over, and it happened though, and I think it happened. It went on air. It was going out. We got it tuned in, and that was probably just one time of probably 10 different times.
Oh, you must have had such a surge of adrenaline.
Right by the, ooh, it's going.
Yeah.
But yeah, it happened, and almost always at the end of it, it felt worth it. It felt worth it.
Yeah, yeah. But,
Yes. Yes.
and it's good to learn how, like you can live through those things. And even if they crash and burn, what's the worst that's happened? It crashed and burned, you try again.
Yep.
It's
put on
a
a long
really
track.
good, yeah.
Contingency
Always
plans.
have something to put on.
It's the first thing I say to someone when I'm training. Even if you always have the thing that you're probably not going to play, but it's in this device that you're not using and it's
Yep.
not on any of these other strips, just do it.
It will save you. Yeah. I was always terrified that the emergency service thing was going to come on when I was doing live programming.
I was like,
And I
"What?
was not
What
real
am I supposed
sure
to do?"
how that was
Yeah.
really supposed to go.
Am I supposed to turn up this one or this one? How do I know?
And now things are so complicated in there with computers and, so much different, like sources and whoa.
I'm excited for the new building for that too.
I think it'll all get worked out and it'll all be smooth.
Dylan says there's been lots of strong opinions expressed to him on what things should be on which channels. And I just look forward to AV-Air being separate from PC
Uh-huh.
because those things need to be separate. I need my extra contingency channel. I need my
Yeah.
wellness moments
Yeah.
to play whenever I don't have that track.
So you got
queued
that
up.
thing in the
Yeah.
corner that you can
Yeah.
pull out, yeah, to save your butt.
The question is, where are we going, and what's exciting about KOPN right now and that changing culture? And I think it is having someone like Dylan and Allie who are ready to receive, just like VidWest, empowering folks with the cameras and the lights and the recording equipment, of really being poised to have that parking lot, have that accessibility, and get people's attention and bring them in and show them how they have this playground to play on. Sure, you can invest in the microphones and the insulation and whatever to become your own audiobook narrator and have your own illustrious career right from your home, but you don't know what you want until you start playing with it. So
Yeah.
I really think that both our virtual world, where we have to do videos and social media and podcasting and get the messages out, I think that there's a whole nother generation. There's every generation will need storytelling, because that's the only thing that's going to really make real change. So that gets me excited about
Yeah.
KOPN. Is
And
just
we
having
lost our
those.
stories. We lost our stories so rapidly. I mean, we had people sitting around a campfire on a porch forever. And within just a few generations, that was wiped out. All those stories, all those family stories, all those stories people swapped, when you were stuck in the wintertime inside, that all is gone. And I really think that community radio is the equivalent of that campfire.
Oh, yeah.
That it is a place that we can still share those stories. And the interesting thing about the human voice is, like you said, you create your own pictures when you're hearing a story or you're just hearing a voice. That comes automatically from your subconscious. It just is there.
And reveals some things
It
sometimes.
does. It does. And it also helps you work through things. I did a series on like little interviews with storytellers, and one of them said her husband, when he was a child, was thrown into a body of water to learn to swim, which is, like very traumatic. And so when he would hear fairy tales and stories, he always imagined that the creature or whatever the monster was a under the water kind of monster. He was working through his fear that way. It was like sort of this deep process. And if you think about oral history, those stories have been honed for thousands of years in the oral tradition. they are particularly targeted to reach us and tell us the great stories. The story of, our journey through life in a metaphor, and the lessons that you need to learn, usually through failure, through challenges, through having to sift the ashes through a colander for a witch or something, And that's what I think is part of the power of radio, is not the professional, DJ out there spinning music that maybe they didn't even pick. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about real people sitting around, telling stories, discussion, sharing, and out of that comes a much deeper understanding of humans and the things that they're actually, like going through on a personal basis. We don't know what those people on Good Morning America are really going through. And, it's in the tabloids, but you don't know if that's true.
Yes.
So, wow. And they're not generally the most interesting people anyway. When you get to sit down one-on-one with them, probably, where, there's a lot of people just you meet on the sidewalk of whatever town you're in that are hugely interesting people.
Yeah. This actually reminds me of a story of, I get called a lot by, former friends from other nonprofits I've worked for, or my dad, where they'll say, like, Jackie, this happened on KOPN, and like, what's this show or what's happening? And my dad called me and he was like, have you been listening to this show, on Friday afternoon or evening? And the woman was getting really excited, and they were laughing a lot, and there was a lot, not that much music, and they were talking and chatting a lot. And I had been listening to it, and as a KOPN former staff person or something, you sometimes are like, oh, you guys gonna get back to the music, or like, oh wow, they're really loving what they're doing and they're excited. And I got out of the car and left, but my dad had called me, and I was like, I caught the beginning, and he's like, well, I was listening to this show, and I was thinking, I'm listening to this black woman get excited, and I'm hearing it, the conversation get a little rowdy, and I was thinking, like, man, they need to calm down on this radio show. And then they started talking about something real, about how they were feeling and what the celebration was for. And I was like right there with it, and I'm on it, on the edge, and I was thinking, man, as a 70-year-old man, I needed this moment to understand what was going on better in these women's lives. And they played a song, and then they came back on the air, and they were so down. And they said that someone told them to calm down on the air and keep it down. Someone told them the exact same thing that I had been thinking. And now I was mad about it. And I didn't want them to be told to calm down. And that they wanted, and that was all of that growth happened in one show time period.
Yeah.
But he was calling me to let me know, next time I was around someone to say how much he loved that
your dad loved them,
and to support it, because it was making real change in diversity, because he said it was really something that he hadn't thought about, that their perspective in that way, whatever the topic was they were talking about.
Yeah. And so frequently we don't meet people with of diverse backgrounds enough. We tend to be a little siloed off in our little segments of the population, and we need that. It broadens our lives to form empathy with people that maybe he'll never meet them, but he felt empathetic
Yeah,
definitely at that time.
this crossroads, and that's something I know that back to networking and getting people together is always going to be here. Those musicians are always going to intersect. The nonprofits are going to intersect. You know, as long as we keep that PSA program and keep
Yeah,
those guest spots and speaking of the arts shows happening, KOPN opened up this area to me immensely in
yeah,
those different niche populations to realize like, oh yeah, there are adult theater enthusiasts, there are these kind of folks here, and uh, weirdos
yeah,
and classical music lovers and what, you know, it's all here. And it just, whether it was someone coming on to be interviewed by a show or if it's that show host themselves, I was really, I appreciate knowing Columbia in the way I do, thanks to KOPN.
yeah. It's really, it's a great gift to have this. Well, should I close with a final story? I have a nice little
Yes.
story. The Tennessee Hound Dog was Butch Burrell. He was a program director for a while, did his program for a long time. And there was two sisters who were basically homebound in Columbia. So they were very close, but they couldn't visit. They couldn't go visit each other. So both of them were like 24/7 KOPN listeners. And they would call every programmer and just like tell them, oh, we're listening, no, we just love you, you know, and request a song for their other sibling, you know, and I chatted with them a lot when I was doing the Jewel Box, and and she said, so you know you're all dressed up, and I'd love to see what your outfits look like sometime. So I went and visited my parents, and my dad had refurbished a Model A Ford, so I got all dolled up in my mom's stuff, you know, with hats and stuff, and my dad took a picture of me in the Model A Ford
Nice.
being Ruby behaving, and I sent it to her, and she was thrilled. Well, eventually she died, and she had asked Butch to be one of her pallbearers. And I thought, wow, you know, we were a connection for those two women that allowed them to maintain their relationship. And some people had complained, you know, oh, they call every time. And I'm like, well, just say, you know, all you have to do is say, I got to get back to it. Thanks for calling. But that to me was like the power of community radio. That they, you know, like this woman called Butch, said, I want you to come over, talk to me. And when he came over, she said, I want you to be my pallbearer.
It does make me think of the KOPN friends that can't be interviewed for
Yeah,
history collection projects. And you know, it does take every volunteer to shape the programmers that come through. And Mike Callan was just, you know, maybe just a blip on someone's KOPN history radar, but was the commercial classic rock DJ that really showed me how KOPN was different than other stations and explain how, oh, this is what we get to do. But if you were in a commercial radio station, this is what you would have to do. You'd get to pick from folder C or folder B or whatever.
yeah,
And then Meg Poche and Deb Harden, I think, also had wonderful impacts on me through my years here. Just
oh,
being, you know, just not, you know, not being my Catholic aunt, you know, or of one of like 12 of them.
right,
It was a different kind of woman.
right, right, right.
And I really liked getting that
Yeah,
example
yeah.
of like,
So there's
oh,
the two strong women there,
very,
very strong
very.
women.
And that's another nice magic moment is I have always been impressed with who will say yes to a KOPN interview and who will do something for KOPN. And there's some people that don't, that
Yeah,
don't know what community radio is. But Bonnie Raitt did a special meet and greet for Deb when she had cancer, and Meg went with her. before knowing that she had her cancer and getting that diagnosis. And it was very magical to see them
Yeah, I
get
saw
A-list
pictures.
treatment for
Yeah,
that and just be like, oh, thank you, thank you. But I
yeah.
wrote the little letter from my KOPN email and begged her people, and it was great.
Oh, so you were the
I
one that
was the one
actually
that put it
approached
together.
them?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because I just
That's
was
a
like,
wonderful
please.
thing. I mean, it was, Deb, that was like probably the highlight of her life. Really.
I'm
Yeah, and you gave it to her then. Hmm.
happy, happy to. They're amazing. And back to these times and hearing folks' voices, I just always wonder what those ladies would think now, what their commentary on whatever was on Democracy Now! This morning or last week or whatever.
Well, they definitely would have opinions, always.
As we all do here at KOPN.
Yes, we're an opinionated bunch.